One thing that I prefer to do is more quantitative research, but I think, especially as eye trackers develop and we're using eye trackers in a real-world situation, you really have to consider qualitative analysis. So one big issue that I think I'm going to have in my research is that I can plan out an experiment and decide where people will navigate and what I expect them to look at, and then use different analysis to examine what landmarks they look at and what landmarks they don't. But to some extent, I have no control over that. In a static eye tracking situation, a lot of the time you can choose where people are going to look, one place or another. But I think there's going to be a lot more qualitative work needed to analyze this sort of data. So advertising billboards are interesting. The issue with using them is, of course, advertising changes. If you switch out a design, suddenly you can't use it as a landmark for a while until you've built up this idea of what's there again. So it's in some ways better to link the advertising with a separate landmark. And of course, you could use landmarks to point you towards advertising.
The bubble face is a kind of incomplete face. In a lot of conditions, our facial structures are not viewable. In most conditions, for example, if I have a mustache, maybe my mouth region are not that so easy to detect. If I'm wearing a big glass, like my glass, maybe my eye region is not easy to detect. So if we can understand about the detection of this kind of incomplete face, it might help the computer science and AI to detect emotions in a better way.
Toby just released I think it's this week or next week, they've released a $2,500 gaming computer that has an eye tracker inbuilt. They believe they'll sell about 100,000 of these in the next year. So that's pretty exciting. There'll be a research group there if you're really interested in people who are technology geeks and gamers. But in the future, the intention is to have eye trackers in everything, including your glasses that you're wearing, your mobile phone, your laptop, your TV.
So indeed, the ability to know when and what to look at will provide an athlete with an advantage over his or her opponent. So this opens up a lot of research opportunities for us to identify what exactly do they look at. So what is the goalkeeper looking at when he's preparing to save this penalty kick? So previous studies comparing the visual behavior between expert and novice athletes have consistently shown differences in visual behavior across various varieties of sports. Knowing, because if you ask like a super expert athlete, let's say, I don't know, Ronaldo for soccer, he won't be able to tell you where exactly he looks at. So from eye tracking studies, we are able to get an idea of what they're looking at and hopefully help in the training of less skilled athletes.
Eye tracking being used in that context quite a lot recently as well, where it's not just for sports, but it might be for, say, we're working with some Singaporean radiologists and dentists to look at how they do operations. So that eye tracking can be used to help understand how a professional does their job, because they automated it. Like you're saying, Ronaldo's automatically kicking the ball, he doesn't really know how to break it down. It's like trying to teach somebody to drive a car for the first time. You jump in the car with a learner driver and you've got to remember how to drive again. So it's hard for them to articulate exactly how they do things. But also it's a great way to give feedback to the people who are learning a new skill or practicing a new skill on how they're doing it and help them improve. So that's the main use. But what we're also seeing in some driving studies we're doing in Western Australia is that when the novice sees their behaviour replayed with an eye tracker, they change the behaviour much quicker than if they didn't have the eye tracking condition in place. I don't think there's been a lot done in eye tracking in sports marketing. Let me know if you've heard of anything that has been done. But I'd be very interested to see studies about how people look at branding in the context of a match. So you could do that on a television replay or a live television, but you could also do it now with eye tracking glasses. You could do it in the field to understand what are the priority areas for putting ads. Is it on the ball? Is it on the grass around the centre? or is it on the notice boards that move around the edge of the field now? And now they move, people probably ignore them because they know they're ads. But what are the areas that really do catch people's attention, and how can we optimise the cut through with all of the various noise that's going on in a game? So I think there's lots of applications for that in a more general perspective.
For navigation, the obvious ideas would be fixation, so dwell time, items that are fixated, that sort of thing, time of first look. One thing that I haven't mentioned at all, but I want to look at is actually eye tracking measures that aren't really related to fixations at all, but can be used as correlative mental effort. So, for example, most eye trackers pick up pupil dilation, and pupil dilation has been shown to correlate quite well with mental effort. Normally, if your pupils dilate and you're not changing the environment at all, it indicates that you're putting more effort into a task, possibly because you're trying to gather more information, for example. Another issue, another thing that you can look at is blink rate. So it seems to be that the more frequently you blink, that's also related to mental effort as well. And I think these two things are quite interesting to look at from a navigation point of view, because it shows how much, perhaps how much you're taxing your working memory, how much the environment is affecting your mental effort just to navigate a space. And so there's potentially cultural differences in face fixation and identifying emotions. And in my talk, I kind of briefly touched upon this idea that potentially if you've grown up in an area that has a lot of hills, you use those as navigational reference points. If you grow up in a very flat landscape, maybe you don't even develop this strategy. One thing I found from the literature is that there's differences between people who grow up in the countryside and people who grow up in the city insofar as what they fixate in the visual environment. So people who grow up in the countryside tend to fixate faces a lot more than people who grow up in the city. And the idea possibly behind this is that if you're in the countryside, you grow up with a limited set of people around you. And so when you see someone in the street, the chances of you knowing them is actually relatively high. And so you fixate faces as a way to recognize people and interact with them. Whereas in the city, if you're in a very large city like Singapore, a lot of the people that you see in the street, you're not going to recognize. And so you don't bother fixating on their faces. This means that a lot of people from the countryside, when they move to the city, at least for the first couple of weeks, they report it's quite stressful, and they put a lot of effort in. They feel very drained when they just navigated a very simple space. It tends to be that these people are fixating a lot of faces all the time. And this visual search, which is something that people in the city don't do, is something that could be kind of fatiguing them a lot. And so I think that the more we do eye tracking studies, the more cross-cultural differences, not just between city dwellers and country dwellers, but also between different countries, could really show up some interesting effects.
So I think that's something